Britain is about to get its seventh Prime Minister in just 10 years, and this time the man taking power wasn't chosen by the public in a general election. Andy Burnham, known across British politics as the King of the North, is set to replace Keir Starmer as Labour leader and become Prime Minister after winning overwhelming support from his party. But this isn't simply another leadership change. It is Labour's attempt to stop a political earthquake before it happens. Nigel Farage's Reform UK has led opinion polls for months. Britain's traditional political map is shifting rapidly, and Burnham has just a few years to convince voters that Labour can still deliver. The question is no longer whether British politics is changing. The question is whether Burnham can change it fast enough. To understand why Andy Burnham's rise matters, you first need to understand the political situation Britain finds itself in. Since the Brexit referendum in 2016, the UK has experienced extraordinary political instability. David Cameron resigned after the referendum. Theresa May followed. Boris Johnson left office after a series of scandals. Liz Truss lasted only 49 days, making her Britain's shortest-serving Prime Minister. Rishi Sunak then lost the 2024 general election to Labour under Keir Starmer. Now, less than 3 years later, Starmer himself has been forced out after mounting dissatisfaction among Labour MPs and declining public approval. That means Britain will soon have had 7 prime ministers in a single decade, an extraordinary level of political turnover for one of the world's oldest parliamentary democracies. Andy Burnham enters office with an unusual political background. Before returning to Westminster, he served for nearly a decade as the directly elected mayor of Greater Manchester, where he built a reputation for defending Northern England against what many viewed as excessive political and economic centralization in London. His supporters call him the King of the North because of his relentless campaign for greater regional investment, more local decision-making, and stronger public services. Now he wants to apply that same philosophy to the entire country. The first reason Burnham's appointment matters is that Labour believes it faces an existential political threat. That threat is Reform UK. Led by Brexit architect Nigel Farage, Reform has transformed itself from a protest movement into Britain's fastest-growing political force. Multiple national opinion polls throughout 2026 have placed Reform either first or tied for first nationally, something almost unimaginable just a few years ago. For decades, British politics revolved around 2 dominant parties, Labour on the centre-left and the Conservatives on the centre-right. That 2-party dominance is beginning to fracture. Many former Conservative voters have moved to Reform because of concerns over immigration, economic stagnation, and dissatisfaction with traditional politics. At the same time, Labour has struggled to hold onto many working-class communities across Northern England and the Midlands, areas often described as Britain's left-behind regions. These communities once formed Labour's electoral backbone. Today, many increasingly support Reform. Burnham understands this challenge perhaps better than anyone in Labour. As mayor, he consistently argued that Britain's biggest political divide is no longer simply left versus right. Instead, he believes the divide is increasingly between London and the rest of the country. That diagnosis explains almost every policy priority he has announced, and it leads directly to his biggest political gamble. Burnham's central promise is remarkably simple. He wants to transfer power away from Westminster and toward local communities. He describes this as the biggest redistribution of political and economic authority in modern Britain. That means giving regional governments greater control over transport, housing, infrastructure, healthcare, skills training, and local economic development. Supporters argue that Britain's highly centralized system has created enormous regional inequalities. London alone generates roughly 1/4 of the UK's total economic output, despite containing only around 13% of the population. Productivity, wages, investment, and infrastructure spending remain significantly higher in southern England than across much of the north. Burnham argues that allowing local leaders to make more decisions would produce faster economic growth while restoring trust in government. His broader economic vision also includes reindustrialization, bringing more manufacturing and advanced industries back into Britain. Rather than relying primarily on financial services centered in London, Burnham wants stronger investment in regional industry, clean energy, advanced manufacturing, rail networks, and innovation outside the capital. The strategy resembles elements of industrial policies increasingly seen in the United States, the European Union, and parts of East Asia. Governments across developed economies have begun taking a more active role in directing investment towards strategic industries. But there is one major obstacle. Transforming Britain's economy takes years. Burnham may only have 3. The third reason this leadership change matters is timing. Under British law, the next general election must be held no later than 2029. That gives Burnham less than 3 years to prove his approach works. Economic transformation rarely produces immediate political rewards. Building factories takes time. Infrastructure projects often require years before construction even begins. Regional development plans usually take an entire decade before their effects become fully visible. Voters, however, rarely wait that long. Burnham also inherits serious economic constraints. Britain's public debt remains close to 100% of GDP. Economic growth has remained relatively weak compared with historical averages. Public services continue facing pressure after years of inflation, labor shortages, and rising healthcare demand. Meanwhile, Reform continues building momentum by arguing that Britain's political establishment has failed regardless of which major party governs. That creates enormous pressure on Burnham's cabinet appointments. His first ministers will signal whether he intends to unite Labour's different ideological wings or pursue a more confrontational political strategy. Financial markets will watch his economic agenda closely. Business leaders will seek reassurance that increased government involvement does not undermine investment confidence. And Reform will likely frame every difficult economic decision as further evidence that traditional politics cannot solve Britain's problems. Burnham therefore begins his premiership with unusually little political honeymoon. The campaign for the next election effectively starts now. Andy Burnham is not simply inheriting Britain's government, he is inheriting a country searching for political stability after a decade of constant upheaval. And whether he succeeds may determine not only Labour's future, but the direction of British politics for years to come. If you enjoyed this analysis, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the International Desk, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next deep dive into the geopolitical stories shaping our world.